My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I've been the family disappointment for as long as I can remember. Not because I was a bad kid, quite the opposite, actually. I was the one who got straight A's, helped with dinner every night, and never missed curfew. But none of that mattered because I wasn't Marcus. Marcus was born 18 months after me, and from the moment he took his first breath, he became the center of our universe. Mom and Dad acted like he was some kind of miracle child, while I was just there. The practice round. The rough draft before the masterpiece. I remember being 7 years old, sitting at our kitchen table with my report card spread out in front of me. 6 A's and 1 A- in math. I was so proud, practically vibrating with excitement as I waited for Mom and Dad to come home from work. "Look," I said, thrusting the paper toward my mother as she walked through the door. "I got almost all A's." Mom glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey," she said absently, already moving toward the living room where Marcus was building with Legos. "Marcus, show me what you made." I stood there holding my report card, watching as she knelt down beside my 6-year-old brother, gasping with delight over his crooked Lego tower like he'd just constructed the Taj Mahal. That A- might as well have been an F in my parents' eyes. But when Marcus brought home his first report card the following year, with 3 B's, 2 C's, and a D in reading, Dad actually took him out for ice cream to celebrate his hard work. I wish I could say that was an isolated incident, but it set the pattern for the next 23 years of my life. When I was 12, I won the regional science fair with a project on renewable energy. I spent months researching, building a working model of a wind turbine, and preparing my presentation. The local newspaper even wanted to do a story about it. But the same week, Marcus scored his first goal in Little League soccer, and suddenly that was all anyone could talk about. "Elena's science thing is fine," Mom told our Aunt Carmen on the phone, "but you should see Marcus on that field. He's a natural athlete. We're thinking about getting him a personal trainer." A personal trainer. For an 11-year-old who scored 1 goal in recreational soccer. Meanwhile, my regional science fair trophy sat on a shelf in my bedroom, collecting dust, while Marcus's participation trophy from that same season took pride of place on our living room mantel. The disparity became even more obvious when high school rolled around. I maintained a 4.2 GPA, was captain of the debate team, and volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. Marcus barely scraped by with C's and D's, but he played varsity football, and that's all that mattered to our parents. Friday nights were the worst. The whole family would pile into Dad's SUV and drive to Marcus's games, where Mom and Dad would scream his name from the bleachers like he was playing in the Super Bowl. I'd sit there with my homework, trying to ignore the way other parents looked at our family with envy, wishing they had a son like Marcus. "Your brother is going to get a full scholarship," Dad would tell anyone who'd listen. Division I schools are already looking at him, and he's only a junior. Meanwhile, I was quietly applying for academic scholarships, filling out applications, and writing essays with no help from anyone. When I got accepted to Northwestern University with a full academic scholarship, you'd have thought I'd won the lottery. Instead, Dad's first words were, "That's great, Mija, but make sure you don't slack off. Marcus has 3 more schools coming to scout him next month." The scholarship I earned covered tuition, room, board, and books, a $200,000 value over 4 years. It was the kind of achievement that should have made any parent burst with pride. But at dinner that night, the conversation lasted exactly 30 seconds before shifting to Marcus's upcoming playoff game. I learned early that my achievements were just background noise in the Marcus Rodriguez show. If there was one person who saw through the family's golden child worship, it was my Aunt Carmen, Mom's younger sister. Carmen was everything my mother wasn't: direct, fair-minded, and completely unimpressed by golden child theatrics. Carmen lived about an hour away, but she made it a point to stay involved in our lives. She was the one who came to my science fair presentation, took pictures of my awards, and actually listened when I talked about my dreams of becoming an environmental lawyer. "Your parents are blind, Mija," she told me one afternoon when I was 16. We were sitting in her kitchen, and I'd just finished telling her about how Mom and Dad missed my academic awards ceremony because Marcus had football practice. "They love Marcus more," I said, stirring sugar into my café con leche. "I've accepted it." Carmen reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "No, Elena. Listen to me very carefully. This isn't about love. This is about your parents living vicariously through Marcus because he fits their idea of what success looks like. But they're wrong, and someday they're going to realize just how wrong they are." She squeezed my hand tighter. "You're going to do incredible things with your life. You're smart, hardworking, and you have integrity. Those are the qualities that actually matter in the real world, not how fast someone can run with a football." Carmen was the one who helped me with my college applications when my parents were too busy with Marcus's recruiting visits. She was the one who drove 2 hours to attend my high school graduation when my parents almost skipped it because it conflicted with Marcus's summer training camp. "I'm proud of you," she whispered in my ear as she hugged me after the ceremony, and I actually started crying because I couldn't remember the last time anyone in my family had said those words to me. Carmen became my lifeline during those difficult years. She'd call me every week when I was in college, not to ask about grades or achievements, but just to check in on how I was doing emotionally. She'd send care packages with my favorite snacks and handwritten notes that said things like "keep being amazing" and "the world needs more people like you." When I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, Carmen was sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face. My parents attended, but they spent most of the ceremony on their phones, texting updates about Marcus's latest football drama to their friends. "You see that beautiful, brilliant young woman up there?" Carmen said loudly to the family sitting next to her, pointing at me as I walked across the stage. "That's my niece, and she's going to change the world." I caught her eye from the stage and mouthed, "Thank you." She blew me a kiss and held up a sign she'd made that said Elena Rodriguez, future Supreme Court Justice. My parents didn't even bring a camera. Northwestern University was a revelation for me. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where academic achievement was valued, where professors knew my name, and where I could succeed without constantly being compared to Marcus. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy, but I was hungry for the recognition I'd been denied my entire life. I double majored in environmental science and political science, maintained a 3.95 GPA, and became heavily involved in environmental activism on campus. During my sophomore year, I organized a campus-wide sustainability initiative that reduced Northwestern's carbon footprint by 15% in just one semester. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly I was being interviewed about environmental policy and youth activism. I called home, breathless with excitement, to tell my parents about the news coverage. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, but I could hear Marcus's voice in the background, and she was clearly distracted. "Listen, I have to go. Marcus is having some problems with his offensive coordinator, and we need to call the coach." I hung up feeling deflated, but not entirely surprised. Marcus was a freshman at State University on a football scholarship, and every minor drama in his college career became a family crisis that required immediate attention and intervention. The contrast was stark during family visits home. I'd share stories about my academic achievements, my research opportunities, and my internships with environmental law firms, and I'd get polite nods and "that's nice, dear" responses. But when Marcus talked about football, practice schedules, teammate drama, or his classes, which he was barely passing, my parents hung on every word like he was delivering the State of the Union address. During my junior year, I was selected for a prestigious internship with the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. It was an incredibly competitive position. Only 12 students nationwide were chosen out of over 500 applicants. I'd be working directly with policymakers on climate change legislation. When I called to share the news, Dad's response was, "That's great, Mija. Listen, did you hear that Marcus might get called up to varsity? The starting quarterback got injured, and coach thinks Marcus might get some playing time this season." I stood in my dorm room, holding the phone, staring at the EPA acceptance letter in my hand. This internship could launch my entire career, and my father was more interested in the possibility that Marcus might play in a college football game. That's when something inside me started to shift. I was tired of being an afterthought in my own family. I was tired of my achievements being treated like minor inconveniences that interrupted conversations about Marcus's football career. But I wasn't ready to give up on my family yet. I still believed that if I just achieved enough, accomplished enough, proved myself enough, they'd finally see me. I was naive enough to think that success would eventually demand their attention. I was wrong. I graduated from Northwestern summa cum laude and was accepted to Harvard Law School with a partial scholarship. It should have been the proudest moment of my family's life. Instead, it was overshadowed by the fact that Marcus had been cut from State's football team due to recurring injuries and failing grades. The family crisis surrounding Marcus's academic probation consumed every conversation for months. Dad hired expensive tutors. Mom flew to State University multiple times to meet with academic advisors, and everyone treated it like a national emergency that required immediate intervention from all available resources. Meanwhile, I was beginning one of the most challenging academic programs in the country, and my family support consisted of a text message from Mom that said, "Good luck at school, honey. Try to keep your grades up." Law school was brutal, but I thrived in the competitive environment. I made law review my second year, graduated in the top 10% of my class, and landed a position at Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious environmental law firms. The starting salary was $180,000 a year. When I called to share the news about my job offer, Mom's response was, "Oh, that's nice, Elena. Listen, we're really worried about Marcus. He's been so depressed since he had to leave the football team, and he's talking about dropping out of college entirely. Your father thinks maybe you could talk to him since you're good with school stuff." Good with school stuff. That's how my mother described my Harvard law degree and my job at a top-tier law firm. I was good with school stuff. That conversation marked a turning point for me. I realized that no matter what I achieved, my family would always see me as the supporting character in Marcus's story. I was never going to be the star of my own narrative in their eyes. So I stopped trying to be. I moved to Chicago, threw myself into my legal career, and began building a life that had nothing to do with seeking my family's approval. I bought a beautiful condo in Lincoln Park, started dating a wonderful man named David who was a fellow attorney, and began establishing myself as a rising star in environmental law. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy. I was surrounded by colleagues who respected my work, friends who valued my opinions, and a romantic partner who thought I was extraordinary. I was finally living in a world where my achievements mattered. But I still hadn't learned to completely let go of the need for my family's recognition. That lesson was coming, and it would be more painful than anything that had come before. 3 years into my career at Morrison & Associates, I was promoted to senior associate and given my own cases. I was building a reputation as one of the firm's most promising young attorneys, and I was in love with David, who had proposed to me on a beautiful autumn weekend in Vermont. I was excited to share both pieces of news with my family. For once, I had something that I thought they couldn't possibly overlook or diminish. I was getting married to an amazing man, and I was succeeding in my career beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I decided to surprise them with a visit home to Chicago for Sunday dinner. I wanted to see their faces when I showed them my engagement ring and told them about my promotion. I imagined Mom crying happy tears, Dad giving me one of his rare, genuine hugs, and even Marcus being excited about having a new brother-in-law. I should have known better. I walked into the house with a bottle of champagne and a huge smile on my face. The whole family was gathered around the kitchen table, and they all looked up when I entered. "Elena," Mom said, looking surprised. "What are you doing here? You didn't call." "I wanted to surprise you," I said, setting the champagne on the counter. "I have some incredible news to share." Dad looked at his watch. "Well, make it quick, Mija. We're watching Marcus's interview on the local sports channel in 20 minutes. "Marcus's interview?" I looked at my brother, who was grinning smugly. "What interview?" "Oh, didn't you hear?" Mom said, practically bouncing in her seat. "Marcus got hired as an assistant coach at his old high school. They're doing a whole segment about local boys who are giving back to their community. We're so proud." An assistant coaching position at a high school. Marcus, who had flunked out of State University and had been working at a sporting goods store for the past 2 years, had gotten a part-time coaching job, and they were treating it like he'd been elected to Congress. "That's great," I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "I'm happy for you, Marcus." "Thanks, sis," he said, still grinning. "It's just the beginning, you know? I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe getting a degree in sports management. Dad says he'll help me pay for it." Dad says he'll help him pay for it. I had paid for my own law school with loans and scholarships, worked part-time throughout my entire academic career, and graduated with $150,000 in debt. But Marcus gets a part-time coaching job, and suddenly Dad's opening his wallet to fund another degree. "So, what's your news, honey?" Mom asked absently, her eyes drifting toward the TV where a commercial was playing. I held up my left hand, where David's grandmother's diamond ring sparkled in the kitchen light. "I'm engaged." The room went quiet for about 5 seconds. Then Mom let out a small gasp, and Dad smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since I'd walked in. "Elena, that's wonderful," Mom said, reaching for my hand to examine the ring. "When did this happen? Who's the lucky guy? Tell us everything." For a moment, I felt that warm rush of family attention that I'd been craving my entire life. They were looking at me, really looking at me, and they seemed genuinely excited about my news. I launched into the story of David's proposal, describing the weekend in Vermont, the beautiful restaurant where he'd gotten down on one knee, and how happy we were together. I talked about David's career, his family, and our plans for the future. And I said, saving the best for last, I was just promoted to senior associate at my firm. I'm the youngest person in Morrison & Associates history to reach that level. I'm going to be handling some of the biggest environmental cases in the Midwest. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Dad said, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was the moment everything would change. Maybe they'd finally see. "Marcus, come here." Mom suddenly interrupted, jumping up from her chair. "The interview is starting." And just like that, I was forgotten again. The entire family rushed into the living room, leaving me standing in the kitchen with my engagement ring and my career news, watching my brother's face fill the TV screen. I followed them into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, listening to the local sports reporter interview Marcus about his inspiring journey from college athlete to youth mentor. The whole segment lasted maybe 4 minutes, but you'd have thought it was an Academy Award acceptance speech based on my family's reaction. "Did you hear what he said about making a difference in kids' lives?" Mom whispered to Dad. "He's always been a natural leader," Dad replied proudly. I sat there, my engagement ring feeling heavy on my finger, and realized that nothing would ever be enough. I could win a Pulitzer Prize, argue a case before the Supreme Court, or cure cancer, and my family would still be more excited about Marcus getting a participation trophy. That night, I called Carmen from my childhood bedroom. "How did it go?" she asked. "Were they excited about your engagement?" For about 3 minutes, I said, and then I told her the whole story. Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Elena, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." "What?" "Your parents are never going to change. They're never going to see you the way you deserve to be seen. And if you keep waiting for their approval, you're going to waste your entire life being miserable." I knew she was right, but hearing it out loud still hurt. "You have to decide," Carmen continued. "Are you going to keep giving them the power to make you feel small, or are you going to build a life that makes you happy regardless of what they think?" That conversation changed everything for me. I stopped calling home every week. I stopped sharing my achievements with my parents. I stopped hoping for their approval and started focusing on the people in my life who actually valued me. But I made one mistake. I didn't cut ties completely. I still attended family gatherings, still played the role of the dutiful daughter, and still held on to a small hope that someday things might be different. That hope would prove to be my biggest weakness. Over the next 5 years, I poured all my energy into building the life I wanted. David and I had a beautiful wedding. Carmen walked me down the aisle since Dad was too busy, helping Marcus prepare for his second attempt at college. My parents attended, but they spent most of the reception talking to other guests about Marcus's latest coaching achievements. I didn't care anymore. Or at least I told myself I didn't care. I was surrounded by people who loved and supported me, and that was enough. My career flourished in ways I'd never imagined. I became a partner at Morrison & Associates at 32, making me one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. I was earning nearly $400,000 a year, had argued cases before the Illinois Supreme Court, and was regularly quoted in national publications about environmental law. More importantly, I was making a real difference in the world. I led the legal team that won a landmark case against a major corporation for groundwater contamination, resulting in a $50 million settlement that funded cleanup efforts and medical care for affected communities. I helped draft legislation that strengthened environmental protections for endangered wetlands. I was invited to speak at law schools and environmental conferences across the country. David and I bought a beautiful home in Lincoln Park, traveled extensively, and built a wonderful life together. We tried for several years to have children, but after 3 miscarriages, we decided to focus on our careers and our relationship. It was a difficult decision, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Throughout all of this, my family's reactions remained predictably lukewarm. When I was featured on the cover of Chicago Lawyer magazine as one of the city's top 40 under 40, Mom's response was a brief phone call that lasted exactly long enough for her to tell me that Marcus had been promoted to head coach at the high school. When I won the Illinois Environmental Law Association's Attorney of the Year award, Dad's congratulations came in the form of a text message. "Proud of you, Mija. Marcus says hi. Marcus says hi." As if Marcus's casual greeting was the real prize I should be grateful for. I learned to celebrate my achievements with David, Carmen, and my chosen family of friends and colleagues. I stopped expecting anything from my parents, and I thought I'd made peace with our relationship. I was wrong. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in my office, reviewing briefs for a major case, when my phone rang. It was Mom, which was unusual since she rarely called me at work. "Elena, I need to ask you for a favor," she said without preamble. "What's going on?" "Marcus wants to go back to school to get his master's degree in sports management, but the program is expensive, and he doesn't qualify for financial aid because of his previous academic record." I had a sinking feeling about where this conversation was heading. "We were wondering if you could help him out," Mom continued. "I know you're doing well with your law practice, and this would really mean a lot to Marcus. The program costs about $40,000, and we could pay you back over time." I sat in my leather chair, looking out at the Chicago skyline, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to pay for Marcus's master's degree?" "Well, loan him the money," Mom said quickly. "Like I said, we'd pay you back." "With what money?" I asked. "Marcus makes maybe $35,000 a year coaching, and you and Dad are living on Social Security and Dad's pension." "We'd figure it out," Mom said, sounding defensive. "Family helps family, Elena. You know that. Family helps family." I thought about all the times I'd needed help, emotional support, financial assistance during law school, someone to celebrate my achievements with, and how often my family had been too busy with Marcus to notice. "I need to think about it," I said. "Don't think too long," Mom replied. "The application deadline is next month, and Marcus is really excited about this opportunity." After I hung up, I sat in my office for an hour, staring at the wall and thinking about the audacity of their request. They wanted me to pay $40,000 for Marcus to get a master's degree that he probably wouldn't even finish, while they'd never contributed a single dollar to my education beyond high school. But what really made me angry wasn't the money. I could afford it. What made me furious was the assumption that my success existed solely to serve Marcus's needs. They saw my law degree, my partnership, my financial stability not as my achievements, but as resources that should be available to their golden child. I called Carmen that evening and told her about the conversation. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to say no," I said, surprised by the certainty in my own voice. "Good for you," Carmen said. "It's about time." I called Mom back the next day. "I've thought about your request," I said, "and I'm not going to loan Marcus the money for his master's degree." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. "Elena," she finally said, "I don't think you understand how important this is to Marcus. This degree could change his whole career trajectory." "I understand perfectly," I said. "But Marcus is 31 years old. If he wants a master's degree, he can apply for student loans like everyone else. How can you be so selfish?" Mom's voice rose with indignation. "You have all this money, and you won't help your own brother?" "I'm not being selfish," I said, feeling my own anger rising. "I worked for everything I have. I paid for my own education, built my own career, and earned my own success. Marcus can do the same thing." "That's different," Mom said. "You were always good at school. Marcus needs more support." Marcus needs to learn to support himself, I said. And frankly, I'm tired of being treated like a bank account that exists for his benefit. I can't believe you're saying this, Mom said, her voice getting shrill. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I interrupted. When have you ever supported my dreams, celebrated my achievements, or put my needs first? When have you ever treated me like I mattered as much as Marcus? That's not fair, Mom said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. You're right, I said. It's not fair. It's not fair that I spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never going to be given. It's not fair that Marcus gets endless chances and unlimited support while I had to fight for everything alone. And it's not fair that you see my success as something that should benefit everyone except me. Elena. I'm done, I said. I'm done being invisible in my own family. I'm done having my achievements minimized and my feelings dismissed. And I'm done being Marcus's backup plan when he can't handle his own responsibilities. I hung up the phone and immediately felt a mixture of relief and terror. I'd finally said what I'd been thinking for years, but I'd also potentially destroyed my relationship with my parents. Over the next few weeks, the silence from my family was deafening. No phone calls, no text messages, no attempts to reach out or repair the relationship. It was as if I'd ceased to exist the moment I stopped being useful to them. The only person who called was Carmen. I'm proud of you, she said. I know that wasn't easy. It feels awful, I admitted. I keep thinking maybe I should have just given him the money. No, Carmen said firmly. You did the right thing. They needed to hear what you said, even if they're not ready to accept it yet. I threw myself into work with renewed intensity, taking on bigger cases and more responsibility. I was traveling constantly, speaking at conferences, and building a national reputation in environmental law. My career was soaring, but personally, I felt like I was in free fall. Then, 6 months after our fight, I got a call that changed everything. Elena, it's Marcus. I almost dropped my phone. It was the first time anyone in my family had contacted me since our argument about the master's degree program. Hi, Marcus, I said carefully. How are you? I'm good, he said, and I could hear the awkwardness in his voice. Listen, I have some news. I'm getting married. Despite everything, I felt a genuine surge of happiness for him. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Who's the lucky woman? Her name is Sarah, Marcus said, and his voice warmed as he talked about her. She's a teacher at the elementary school where I coach. We've been dating for 2 years, and I proposed last month. He talked for a few minutes about Sarah, their relationship, and their wedding plans. For a moment, it felt like we were just siblings again, sharing good news and catching up on each other's lives. The wedding is in 6 months, Marcus continued. We're having it at the Marriott downtown, and we're expecting about 200 people. Mom and Dad are really excited. They're helping us plan everything. Of course they were. I wondered if they were paying for the wedding too, or if they'd found another way to support Marcus's dreams while ignoring their own financial limitations. I want you to be there, Elena, Marcus said. I know things have been weird between you and Mom and Dad, but you're my sister. It wouldn't be the same without you. I felt a familiar tug of hope. Maybe this could be the beginning of repairing our family relationships. Maybe Marcus's wedding could be a fresh start for all of us. Of course I'll be there, I said. I wouldn't miss it. Great, Marcus said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. I'll send you the formal invitation, but I wanted to call personally. I'm really happy for you, Marcus, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, he was still my brother, and I wanted him to be happy. Thanks, Elena. And listen, I know Mom and Dad can be difficult sometimes, but they love you. We all do. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of our family's dysfunction that I'd ever heard from Marcus, and it meant more to me than he probably realized. Over the next few months, I threw myself into wedding preparation. I bought a beautiful dress, arranged time off from work, and even offered to help with some of the planning. Mom was polite but distant when I called, and Dad seemed uncomfortable whenever we spoke, but I told myself that time would heal the wounds. I was determined to be the perfect sister at Marcus's wedding. I wanted to show my family that I could be supportive and loving, that I didn't hold grudges, and that I was capable of putting family first when it really mattered. I had no idea that the wedding would become the stage for the most dramatic confrontation of my life. The week before Marcus's wedding, I learned something that changed everything. I was having lunch with Carmen, catching up on family gossip and wedding plans, when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "I'm so glad Marcus found someone nice," Carmen said, cutting into her salad. "Especially after what happened with his previous engagement." I looked up from my soup. "What previous engagement?" Carmen's face went pale. "Oh, Elena, I thought you knew." "I assumed someone would have told you." "Told me what?" Carmen set down her fork and reached across the table to take my hand. "Marcus was engaged before Sarah. About 3 years ago, to a woman named Jessica. They were together for 2 years, and the family was planning this huge wedding. Your parents put down a $15,000 deposit on a venue, bought Jessica a $5,000 engagement ring, and your mother was already shopping for her mother-of-the-groom dress." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 3 years ago. That would have been right around the time my parents were claiming they couldn't afford to help with my law school loans, right around the time they were too busy to attend my engagement party. "What happened?" I asked weakly. "Jessica broke up with him about 2 months before the wedding," Carmen continued. "Apparently, she found out he'd been cheating on her with multiple women. It was a huge scandal. The whole family was devastated, and they lost most of their deposits." I sat there, trying to process what I was hearing. My parents had been willing to spend $20,000 on Marcus's first wedding to a woman I'd never even heard of, but they couldn't manage to attend my engagement party or contribute anything to my education. "There's more," Carmen said gently. "After the breakup, Marcus went through a really rough period. He was drinking heavily, lost his coaching job, and moved back in with your parents for almost a year. Your mom and dad supported him financially the entire time, paid for therapy, helped him get back on his feet, even bought him a new car when his old one broke down. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that made me feel sick. During the same period when my parents were refusing to loan me money for Marcus's master's degree and claiming they were living on a tight budget, they'd been funding his entire life while he recovered from his own poor decisions. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Carmen looked uncomfortable. Your mother asked everyone not to mention it to you. She said you and Marcus were going through a rough patch, and she didn't want to make things worse. More likely, she didn't want me to know how much money and emotional energy they were willing to invest in Marcus's problems while completely ignoring my success and stability. Elena, Carmen said carefully, there's something else you should know. I looked at her, dreading what was coming next. The reason your parents can afford the second wedding is because Marcus got a settlement from his car accident 2 years ago. Remember when he hurt his back and couldn't work for a few months? The insurance company paid him $80,000, and instead of using it responsibly, he's spending most of it on this wedding. $80,000. Marcus had received an $80,000 settlement and was using it to throw himself an extravagant wedding, while I'd been lectured about family loyalty for refusing to loan him money for school. I excused myself from lunch and spent the rest of the afternoon walking around downtown Chicago, trying to calm down and process what I'd learned. By the time I got home, I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds extreme, but I needed to know the truth about my family's finances and Marcus's life. I needed to understand exactly how much support he'd received over the years and how many of my achievements had been deliberately minimized or ignored. What the private investigator found exceeded even my worst expectations. The private investigator's report arrived 3 days before Marcus's wedding, and it painted a picture of favoritism and financial support that was even more extensive than I'd imagined. Over the past 15 years, my parents had given Marcus more than $150,000 in direct financial support. This included $20,000 for his first failed engagement and wedding deposits, $25,000 in college tuition and expenses after he lost his football scholarship, $15,000 for a car when he moved back home after the Jessica breakup, $12,000 for therapy and rehabilitation programs, $8,000 in monthly allowances during his recovery period, $35,000 in various bailouts for credit card debt, rent payments, and other expenses, $18,000 for a down payment on his current apartment, $12,000 for coaching certification programs and continuing education, $5,000 for multiple vacations and stress relief trips. The investigator had bank records, loan documents, and financial statements that painted a clear picture. My parents had liquidated significant portions of their retirement savings, taken out a second mortgage on their house, and accumulated substantial credit card debt, all to support Marcus's lifestyle and poor financial decisions. Meanwhile, they'd never contributed a single dollar to my education, career, or life milestones. But the financial support was only part of the story. The investigator had also uncovered the full extent of Marcus's history of irresponsible behavior that my family had been covering up for years. The cheating scandal with Jessica was just the tip of the iceberg. Marcus had been fired from 3 different coaching positions for various infractions, including showing up to practice intoxicated and having inappropriate relationships with other staff members. Each time, my parents had intervened, made calls to their connections, and helped him find new positions. He'd been arrested twice for DUI, but the charges had been reduced or dismissed thanks to expensive legal representation that my parents had paid for. He defaulted on multiple credit cards and loans, forcing my parents to co-sign new ones or pay off the balances directly. Most shocking of all, the investigator had found evidence that Marcus had been lying about his current job situation. He wasn't just a high school coach. He was actually working part-time at 3 different schools because he couldn't hold down a full-time position anywhere. His total annual income was less than $25,000, not the $35,000 he'd been claiming. The $80,000 settlement from his car accident? He'd blown through most of it within 6 months on gambling, expensive purchases, and his lavish proposal to Sarah. The wedding was being funded by yet another loan from my parents, who had mortgaged their future to pay for their son's 3rd attempt at adult responsibility. I sat in my home office, surrounded by documents and bank statements, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart, that had been broken years ago. What broke was my last connection to the naive young woman who had spent 30 years hoping her family would love her as much as they loved Marcus. I had built an incredible life for myself. I was a successful attorney with a national reputation, a loving marriage, financial security, and the respect of my peers. I had everything I'd ever dreamed of achieving, but I was still that little girl holding a report card, waiting for my parents to notice my achievements. The wedding was in 2 days, and I had a decision to make. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, which felt appropriate for my mood. I'd barely slept the night before, alternating between fury and heartbreak as I thought about what the private investigator had uncovered. David was concerned about me. "You've been different all week," he said over breakfast. "Are you sure you want to go to this wedding? You don't owe them anything, Elena." "I need to go," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure why. "Marcus is still my brother." "Your brother who's been the beneficiary of preferential treatment your entire life while you were ignored and dismissed," David pointed out. "Your brother whose lifestyle has been subsidized to the tune of $150,000 while you paid for everything yourself." I knew he was right, but I couldn't explain the compulsion I felt to attend the wedding. Maybe I needed to see my family's hypocrisy play out one more time. Maybe I needed closure. Or maybe I was still holding onto hope that someone would finally acknowledge what they'd done to me. I put on my emerald green dress, the one that made me look successful and confident, and David and I drove to the Marriott. The ballroom was decorated with white roses and gold accents, clearly expensive and elaborate. I wondered how much debt my parents had taken on to pay for the celebration of Marcus's third attempt at finding happiness. The ceremony was beautiful, I had to admit. Sarah looked radiant in her designer dress, and Marcus actually looked genuinely happy as he watched her walk down the aisle. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope that maybe this time would be different for him. Maybe Sarah would be the stabilizing force he needed. My parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Mom was wearing a new dress and jewelry that I knew they couldn't afford, and Dad had gotten a new suit for the occasion. They looked like the proud parents of a successful son, not people who had bankrupted themselves to maintain an illusion. I sat in the back with David, watching the ceremony and thinking about all the family events where I'd been the afterthought, the side character in Marcus's ongoing drama. My high school graduation, my college graduation, my law school graduation, my engagement party, my wedding, all of them had been overshadowed by whatever Marcus crisis was happening at the time. But this wedding was his moment, and everyone was focused entirely on him, the way it had always been. During the reception, I watched my extended family congratulate Marcus and Sarah, praising them for finding each other and wishing them happiness. Aunts and uncles who barely knew about my career success were effusive in their praise for Marcus's maturity and growth. "He's really turned his life around," I heard my Aunt Rosa tell another relative. "Maria and Roberto are so proud of how he's become such a responsible young man." Responsible. Marcus, who had never held a steady job, who had been supported financially by our parents for his entire adult life, who had cheated on his previous fiancée and blown through an $80,000 settlement in 6 months, was being praised for his responsibility. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I stared at myself in the mirror and tried to decide what I was going to do. I could get through the evening, smile politely, and continue pretending that everything was normal. I could maintain the fiction that we were a happy family, that Marcus deserved all the attention and support he'd received, and that my achievements were less important than his basic life milestones. Or I could finally tell the truth. I thought about Carmen's words from years earlier. Are you going to keep giving them the power to make you feel small? Or are you going to build a life that makes you happy regardless of what they think? I'd built the life. I'd achieved everything I'd ever dreamed of. But I'd never stopped giving them the power to make me feel small. When I returned to the reception, the DJ was asking everyone to take their seats for the speeches. Marcus's best man gave a rambling toast about their friendship. Sarah's maid of honor talked about love and commitment, and then Dad stood up. I want to say a few words about my son, Dad began, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus has always been special. From the time he was little, we knew he was going to do great things. He's faced some challenges over the years, but he's never given up. He's shown us what determination and character look like. Determination and character. I felt something snap inside my chest. Dad continued, Marcus has always been the kind of person who brings out the best in everyone around him. He's generous, loyal, and caring. Sarah, you're getting a man who will always put family first, who will always be there when you need him. Always be there when you need him. Like he'd been there for me during my struggles in law school. Like he'd been there to celebrate my achievements or support my dreams. Marcus represents everything we've tried to teach our children about integrity and hard work, Dad went on. We couldn't be prouder of the man he's become. That's when I stood up. The entire room turned to look at me. 200 people, all staring at the woman in the emerald green dress who had just interrupted the father of the groom's heartfelt speech. I'm sorry, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. But I can't listen to this anymore. Dad's face went white. Mom looked like she might faint. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Elena, Dad said carefully, maybe you should sit down. No, I said, taking a step forward. I've been sitting down for 30 years. I've been quiet for 30 years. I've been invisible for 30 years while this family rewritten history to make Marcus the hero of every story. The room was completely silent except for the soft sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor as I walked toward the head table. You want to talk about integrity and hard work? I continued, looking directly at my father. Let me tell you about integrity and hard work. My name is Elena Rodriguez, I said, addressing the room of stunned wedding guests. I'm Marcus's older sister, and I think it's time you heard the truth about this family. I could see David in the back of the room, his face a mixture of pride and concern. Carmen was sitting at a table near the middle, and she gave me an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. My father just spoke about determination and character. I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. He talked about integrity and hard work. He said Marcus represents everything they've tried to teach their children. I paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at me. I want to tell you what integrity and hard work actually look like in this family. Mom had found her voice. Elena, stop this right now. This is Marcus's wedding day. You're right, I said, turning to face her. This is Marcus's wedding day. His second attempt at marriage, funded by the same parents who told me they couldn't afford to help with my student loans. A murmur went through the crowd. I could see people exchanging glances, trying to understand what was happening. Let me paint you a picture, I said, walking slowly around the room as I spoke. I graduated valedictorian from high school. I received a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University, where I graduated summa cum laude. I earned my law degree from Harvard, finished in the top 10% of my class, and became the youngest partner in the history of Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. I stopped walking and looked back at my parents. I've argued cases before the Illinois Supreme Court. I've been featured on the cover of Chicago Lawyer magazine. I've won awards for my environmental law work, and I make more money in a year than most people see in a decade. The room was absolutely silent. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. And do you know how my family celebrated these achievements? I asked. They didn't. They were too busy managing Marcus's latest crisis. Elena, Marcus started to speak, but I held up my hand. No, Marcus. You've had 30 years of everyone listening to you. It's my turn now. I turned back to address the room. While I was building my career and paying off student loans, my parents were giving Marcus $150,000 in direct financial support. They paid for his college tuition after he lost his football scholarship due to poor grades. They paid for his first engagement and wedding deposits when he was planning to marry a woman named Jessica, a wedding that was canceled when she discovered he was cheating on her with multiple women. Sarah's face went pale. Clearly, this was information she hadn't heard before. They paid for his therapy, his cars, his rent, his credit card debt, and his various attempts at finding a career. I continued. They mortgaged their house and liquidated their retirement savings to support his lifestyle. I walked over to where my parents were sitting. And when I finally said no, when I refused to loan him $40,000 for a master's degree program, I was called selfish. I was told that family helps family. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. Elena, please don't do this. Don't do what? I asked, my voice rising. Don't tell the truth? Don't point out that Marcus has been fired from 3 coaching positions for various infractions, including showing up to work intoxicated? Don't mention that he's been arrested twice for DUI? Don't talk about how he blew through an $80,000 insurance settlement in 6 months. The murmuring in the crowd was getting louder. I could see Sarah staring at Marcus with dawning horror. Or maybe I shouldn't mention that Marcus isn't actually a successful high school coach, as you've all been told. He's working part-time at 3 different schools because he can't hold down a full-time position anywhere. His annual income is less than $25,000, and this wedding is being funded by yet another loan from parents who are already drowning in debt. That's enough. Mom stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. How dare you ruin your brother's wedding day? How dare you air our family's private business? Private business? I laughed bitterly. You mean the business of treating me like I'm worthless while propping up Marcus's every failure? You mean the business of ignoring my achievements while celebrating his basic life functions? I turned to face Marcus directly. Do you remember my college graduation, Marcus? Of course you don't, because you didn't attend. You had football practice that day, and Mom and Dad decided that was more important than watching their daughter graduate summa cum laude from one of the best universities in the country. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Do you remember my law school graduation? You attended that one, but you spent the entire ceremony texting your friends about some party you wanted to go to. Dad took exactly 2 pictures, and you all left immediately afterward because you didn't want to miss the sports highlights on TV. I could see several wedding guests looking uncomfortable, and some were starting to whisper among themselves. Do you remember my engagement party? The one where Mom and Dad showed up 45 minutes late because they were helping you move into your new apartment? The one where Dad spent the entire evening taking phone calls about your coaching situation. Elena, please, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I know we haven't always. Haven't always what? I interrupted. Haven't always treated me like a human being? Haven't always acknowledged that I exist. I turned back to address the room. I want everyone here to understand something. I didn't come here to ruin Marcus's wedding. I came here hoping that maybe, finally, my family would treat me like I matter. But even today, even at this wedding that's costing our parents their financial future, I'm still invisible. I walked over to where Carmen was sitting and put my hand on her shoulder. There's only one person in this room who has ever truly supported me, who has ever celebrated my achievements, who has ever made me feel like I was worth something. And it's not my parents or my brother. Carmen reached up and squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. I've spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never going to be given equally, I said, my voice finally starting to shake with emotion. I've achieved everything I ever dreamed of, and it's never been enough. I could win a Nobel Prize, and you'd still be more excited about Marcus getting a participation trophy. The room was dead silent now. Even the music had stopped. So here's what's going to happen, I said, straightening my shoulders and finding my strength again. I'm done. I'm done being the family disappointment. I'm done having my achievements minimized. I'm done being treated like a bank account that exists for Marcus's benefit. I looked directly at my parents. And I'm done pretending that we're a loving, supportive family when the truth is that you've never loved me the way you love Marcus. Mom started crying. Elena, that's not true. We do love you. No, I said firmly. You love the idea of me when it's convenient. You love telling people about my success when it makes you look good. But you've never loved me enough to put me first, even once. I turned to Marcus. And you've never been grateful for the sacrifices our parents made for you. You've never acknowledged that your success came at the cost of their financial security and their relationship with me. You've taken everything and given nothing back. Marcus was crying now too. Elena, I never meant. Yes, you did, I said. You meant it every time you let Mom and Dad bail you out. You meant it every time you accepted their money while knowing they couldn't afford it. You meant it every time you let them prioritize your needs over mine. I walked back to the center of the room and addressed the wedding guests one final time. I want you all to know that Marcus and Sarah are good people who deserve to be happy, I said. But I also want you to know the truth about what family loyalty has looked like in the Rodriguez household. I want you to understand that sometimes the most successful person in the room is the one who's been ignored, dismissed, and taken for granted. I looked at Sarah, who was staring at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disappointment. Sarah, I hope Marcus becomes the man you deserve. I hope he learns to appreciate the sacrifices people make for him. And I hope he never takes your love for granted the way he's taken our parents' love for granted. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at my parents one last time. I want you to know that I forgive you, I said. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. But I also want you to know that I'm done. I'm done with family dinners where I'm an afterthought. I'm done with phone calls where you pretend to care about my life. I'm done with being the supporting character in Marcus's story. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor in the otherwise silent room. Elena, wait. Carmen called after me, but I shook my head. I'll call you later, Tia, I said without turning around. But I need to go now. David was waiting for me at the exit, and together we walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind 30 years of disappointment, hope, and heartbreak. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and consequences. My phone rang constantly with calls from family members, friends of the family, and even some of the wedding guests who wanted to express their support or share their own stories of family dysfunction. I turned off my phone and spent the weekend with David, processing what had happened and what it meant for my future. We took long walks, talked for hours, and slowly, I began to feel something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. I'm proud of you, David said as we sat on our couch Sunday evening, watching the sunset through our living room windows. It took incredible courage to do what you did. I feel terrible about ruining their wedding, I admitted. That wasn't what I intended. You didn't ruin their wedding, David said firmly. You told the truth. If the truth ruins something, then it wasn't built on a solid foundation to begin with. On Monday morning, I returned to work and found that news of my wedding speech had somehow made it to my colleagues. Apparently, one of the wedding guests had posted about it on social media, and it had gone viral as a story about standing up to family favoritism. My assistant handed me a stack of messages. You've gotten calls from 3 different talk shows, 2 book publishers, and about 50 people who want to share their own stories about being the invisible child in their families, she said. I was overwhelmed by the response, but also oddly comforted. My experience wasn't unique. There were thousands of people who had lived in the shadow of a golden child sibling who had spent years trying to earn love that was never equally distributed. Carmen called me that evening. "How are you doing, Mija?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I was surprised to realize that I meant it. "How bad was it after I left?" Carmen sighed. "It was pretty bad. Your parents were devastated. Marcus was in shock, and Sarah had a lot of questions for Marcus about the things you mentioned." "I hope I didn't destroy their marriage before it even started," I said. "You didn't destroy anything," Carmen said firmly. "You gave Sarah information she needed to have. What she does with it is up to her." "What about Mom and Dad?" "They're hurt, angry, and embarrassed," Carmen said honestly. "But they're also doing something I've never seen them do before. They're actually talking about their relationship with you. Your mother called me crying yesterday, asking if she's really been as unfair to you as you said." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," Carmen said. "That she's been blind to your achievements for 30 years, and that you deserved so much better from your family." I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Do you think they'll ever change?" "I don't know," Carmen said honestly, "but I think you did the right thing by setting boundaries. You can't control whether they change, but you can control how much power you give them over your happiness." That conversation helped me understand that my wedding speech hadn't been about revenge or cruelty. It had been about finally setting boundaries after 30 years of accepting unacceptable treatment. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a text message from Marcus. "Can we talk? Please?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm not ready yet." He texted back immediately. "I understand. But when you're ready, I have things I need to say to you." It took me another month to call him back. When I did, his voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful than I'd ever heard it. "Elena, I've been thinking about everything you said at the wedding," he began. "And I owe you an apology." "Marcus." "No, let me finish," he said. "You were right about everything. I've been selfish, entitled, and completely oblivious to how much our parents have sacrificed for me. And I've been even more oblivious to how much they've ignored you." I was quiet, not sure how to respond to this version of my brother. "Sarah and I have been in counseling," he continued. "She was really shaken by what you revealed at the wedding, and we almost called off the marriage. But we decided to work through it together, and part of that process has been me taking a hard look at my behavior and my relationship with our family." "How is Sarah?" I asked. "She's hurt and disappointed, but she's giving me a chance to prove that I can be better," Marcus said. "She's also been asking a lot of questions about you and your achievements. She's actually really impressed by what you've accomplished." "I'm glad you're getting help," I said, and I meant it. "Elena, I want you to know that I'm changing things," Marcus said. "I've been working with a financial planner to pay back Mom and Dad for all the money they've given me over the years. I've also been going to AA meetings and working on my drinking problem." This was the first time Marcus had ever acknowledged that he had a drinking problem. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I know I don't deserve it, and I understand if you never want to have a relationship with me again. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see what an incredible person you are, and I'm ashamed that it took me 30 years to notice." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. It was the first time Marcus had ever truly acknowledged my worth, and it meant more to me than I'd expected. "I'm proud of you, Elena," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm proud of everything you've achieved, and I'm sorry I never told you that before. You deserve a brother who celebrates your success, not one who takes it for granted." We talked for over an hour, and for the first time in our lives, it felt like we were having a real conversation. Marcus asked detailed questions about my career, my marriage, and my life. He listened without interrupting, and he responded with genuine interest and pride. It wasn't enough to erase 30 years of hurt, but it was a beginning. 6 months after the wedding, I received a letter from my mother. It was handwritten on her stationery, and it was the longest letter she'd ever written to me. Dear Elena, I've been trying to write this letter for months, and I still don't know if I can find the right words to express how sorry I am. Your father and I have been in therapy since the wedding, trying to understand how we failed you so badly as parents. We've been forced to confront some difficult truths about our behavior and our priorities. You were right about everything you said that day. We did treat Marcus differently than we treated you. We did ignore your achievements while celebrating his basic life milestones. We did take your strength and independence for granted while enabling his irresponsibility. I want you to know that this wasn't because we loved you less. We love you deeply, Elena. But we made the mistake of thinking that because you were strong and capable, you didn't need our support the way Marcus did. We thought you would succeed regardless of what we did, so we focused our energy on the child who seemed to need more help. We were wrong. Everyone needs support, encouragement, and recognition from their parents. Everyone needs to feel valued and celebrated. And we failed to give you those things. I know that our apologies don't erase 30 years of hurt, and I know that you have every right to never forgive us. But I want you to know that we are working to become better people and better parents. We are so proud of everything you've accomplished. We are proud of your strength, your intelligence, your integrity, and your success. We should have been telling you this every day for the past 30 years. I love you, Elena. Not because of what you've achieved, but because of who you are. You are an extraordinary woman, and I am honored to be your mother, even though I haven't acted like it. If you're ever willing to try again with us, we would like to earn back your trust and your love. But we understand if that's not possible. With all my love and deepest regrets, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before calling David into the room to read it with me. What do you think? I asked after he finished. I think it's a start, he said carefully. It sounds like she's finally seeing the situation clearly. But words are easy, it's actions that matter. He was right, of course. But for the first time in my life, I felt like my mother had truly seen me, acknowledged me, and valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for Marcus. I didn't respond to the letter immediately. I needed time to think about what I wanted from my relationship with my parents going forward and what I was willing to offer them. Today, 2 years after Marcus's wedding, my relationship with my family is complicated but honest. It's not the warm, close relationship I once dreamed of having, but it's built on truth and mutual respect rather than denial and favoritism. My parents and I see each other occasionally, usually at Carmen's house for holiday gatherings. The conversations are sometimes awkward, but they're genuine. Mom asks detailed questions about my work and actually listens to the answers. Dad has started sending me articles about environmental law that he finds interesting. Most importantly, they've stopped treating Marcus like a child who needs constant rescue. He's been paying them back steadily, has maintained his sobriety, and has built a stable marriage with Sarah. He's also landed a full-time coaching position at a high school and has been performing well without family intervention. Marcus and I have coffee together about once a month. Our relationship will never be what it might have been if we'd grown up in a different family dynamic, but we're building something new based on honesty and mutual respect. He continues to go to therapy, and he's working hard to become a better husband, son, and brother. Sarah and I have become friendly, and she shared that Marcus talks about me constantly, not as an obligation or an afterthought, but with genuine pride and admiration. She says he keeps a copy of the Chicago Lawyer magazine cover with my photo on it in his office at school. Carmen continues to be the anchor of our family, the one person who has always seen everyone clearly and loved us all equally. She often says that the wedding speech was the best thing that ever happened to our family because it forced us all to face the truth. My career has continued to flourish, and I've recently been approached about a federal judgeship. If I accept, I'll be one of the youngest federal judges in the country. The decision is still pending, but for the first time, I know that whatever I choose, it will be celebrated by my family rather than ignored. David and I are happier than ever, and we've decided to start the adoption process. We're hoping to adopt siblings, and we've talked extensively about how to love children equally and celebrate their individual strengths without favoritism. Looking back on everything that happened, I understand now that the wedding speech wasn't really about my family. It was about me finally finding my voice and claiming my worth. For 30 years, I had allowed other people to define my value, to decide whether my achievements mattered, to determine whether I was worthy of love and recognition. I had given my family the power to make me feel invisible, and they had used that power carelessly and cruelly. But that power was mine to give, and it was mine to take back. The night I stood up at Marcus's wedding and told the truth, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone or get revenge for decades of neglect. I was finally refusing to be invisible. I was demanding to be seen, heard, and acknowledged for who I was and what I had accomplished. In the end, that's what we all want, to be seen for who we truly are, to have our achievements recognized, and to be loved for our authentic selves rather than for the roles we play in other people's stories. I spent 30 years trying to earn something that should have been given freely. I spent 3 decades competing for attention and approval that should have been equally distributed in a healthy family. I wasted years of my life feeling inadequate and invisible when I was actually extraordinary and successful. The biggest tragedy wasn't that my parents favored Marcus. It was that I believed their assessment of my worth rather than trusting my own. But that story is over now. I am no longer the invisible daughter, the overlooked sibling, the family disappointment. I am Elena Rodriguez, successful attorney, devoted wife, beloved friend, and valued family member. I am proud of what I've accomplished, and I no longer need anyone else's approval to validate my worth. If you're reading this story and seeing yourself in it, if you're the overlooked child, the responsible sibling, the one who achieved everything but never got the recognition, I want you to know something important. Your worth is not determined by other people's ability to see it. Your achievements matter, even if they're not celebrated. Your feelings are valid, even if they're dismissed. You deserve love, recognition, and support, even if you're not receiving them. And most importantly, you have the power to stop being invisible. You can demand to be seen, heard, and valued. You can set boundaries with people who take you for granted. You can choose to surround yourself with people who appreciate you for who you are. It's never too late to step out of the shadows and into the light. It's never too late to stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole cake. It's never too late to realize that you are enough, exactly as you are. The day I stood up at Marcus's wedding and told my truth was the day I stopped being invisible. It was the day I chose myself over other people's comfort. It was the day I decided that my story mattered, my voice mattered, and my life mattered. That day changed everything for me, and it changed everything for my family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable dysfunction. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is demand better treatment. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I hope my story gives you permission to tell your own truth, to demand your own recognition, and to step into your own light. You deserve to be seen, celebrated, and loved for exactly who you are. And if the people in your life can't do that for you, then it's time to find people who can. You are not invisible. You are not an afterthought. You are not less important than the golden child in your family. You are extraordinary, and it's time the world knew it. Thank you for reading my story. If it resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Don't forget to like this video if it touched you, and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and claiming your worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to be invisible.